Throughout the years, fighting games have come in many forms. From 2D fighters, 3D fighters, arena fighters, platform fighters, etc., there have been plenty of distinctive and innovative fighting games that allow players to interact with their systems uniquely. Most fighting game players use either a regular controller like a PS4 pad, a dedicated fight stick, or some kind of hitbox. Fighting game players have been using these types of controllers ever since the fighting game genre itself was birthed in 1976 with Sega's Heavyweight Champ, a game that Encyclopedia Britannica calls the first fighting game to allow combat between two player-controlled characters. If that info dump was easily understandable to you due to your experience with fighting games, then that's amazing. But I guarantee you that I'm about to show you a fighting game that you've most likely never heard of. If you've been following my channel ever since the beginning, you may remember that before creating long-form content like I do now, I used to upload playthroughs of various arcade games I enjoyed, and this video concerns one of those. I want you to forget pads, fight sticks, and hitboxes for a moment, because this game doesn't use any of those. Released in arcades worldwide in 2007, Sega's attempt to revolutionize the light gun shooter may not have entered the mainstream, but it's heavily appreciated by the hardcore crowd. Sega's other light gun shooters like Virtua Cop and the House of the Dead may have been a bit mild for some, but this game is way spicier. Too Spicy is, in my opinion, one of the most unique and memorable fighting games I've ever played, and the first point of interest I'll address is the game's genre. It may be easy to judge Too Spicy at first glance and say that it is not a fighting game, but I personally believe that it is, and here's why. Going back to Encyclopedia Britannica, the website defines fighting games by saying that electronic fighting games are based on competitive matches between a player's character and a character controlled by another player or the game. This definition is a bit vague and open-ended, but it perfectly describes the unique gameplay formula of Too Spicy. Most light gun shooters, especially the ones that I mentioned before, follow a very similar formula. Present the game from a first-person perspective, give the player some sort of handgun or fully automatic rifle, and make it so that two players can cooperate with each other to finish the game using the most amount of credits possible. Arcade operators would often crank the difficulty on light gun shooter cabinets to the maximum, giving players less health and making the enemies stronger, therefore making players have to spend more money if they wanted to finish the game. But Too Spicy flips this notion on its head. Instead of being presented from the first person and making players cooperate, the game is presented from a third person perspective and it's about making players compete. With this change to the light gun shooter formula, Sega was able to demonstrate to audiences that they still had unique ideas about where to take the light gun genre going into the 21st century, and this is one of the reasons why the game has stood the test of time in my mind. With that being said, Too Spicy may be focused on multiplayer, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a story to tell. Too Spicy's plot is simple yet effective, and it's told in stylish cutscenes that feature black and white characters interacting with a primarily yellow background. When choosing to play through the game's story mode, a plot synopsis appears on screen. Admittedly, Too Spicy's translation and localization aren't perfect, with some odd sentence structure and grammar, poor voice acting, and some really confusing story beats that come out of nowhere. But for now, this simple synopsis gives us enough information to understand what is going on. All the playable characters have their own personal motivations that drive them forward, but at the end of the day, they all want a piece of the inheritance that Shadow is holding onto. The structure of the story mode is pretty simple. You pick your character, fight through a bunch of levels, defeat the final boss, and then watch the outro. But the fights and cutscenes in between them are different depending on which character you choose. There's Tetsuya, an ex-convict Yakuza member who fights for his Oyabun. Alexander, an amnesiac former soldier who now works for an organization that has ordered him to go after the inheritance, Charlie, a spy who infiltrated the boss's gang, but after having his true identity revealed by the boss, he's forced to fight for his life on the run, Lawrence, an American who, after having his dog Washington killed by Shadow, seeks revenge, Six, an assassin who acted as the boss's right-hand man but has now been replaced by Shadow, and finally, Ming Hua, a Chinese thief who steals batteries to prolong her lifespan. Wait, batteries? That doesn't make any sense. Why would a human need batteries to live? That's the thing. They're not human. 2Spicy takes place in a cyberpunk society where robots flawlessly blend in with humans, and you can never quite tell who is who in this world. If you take damage during a battle, you can see your character's skin disintegrate, revealing their metallic exoskeleton inside. The most blatant example of this is in the game's intro movie, where we can see Tetsuya's true form be revealed to us in real time. Speaking of Tetsuya, let's cover his storyline in detail. Every character's story begins in media res in a warehouse where they confront Shadow. After fighting Shadow on an even surface, they make their way to the warehouse's upper floor, but after that doesn't work, they attempt to destroy Tetsuya with a giant girder. But not before we go back to where it all started to find out who exactly our character is.
Well, why don't we get the inheritance for our family, huh?
After this, the first true level in the past begins, and it's a fight against Ming Hua. She mentions something about a deal being cancelled, implying that she and Tetsuya had a deal planned regarding information on the boss's inheritance. After using some persuasive techniques, Ming Hua reveals that she betrayed Tetsuya because there was someone in Hong Kong who would buy her information for more than what he was offering. There, he meets Alexander, and the two battle over the inheritance. After being defeated, Alexander tells Tetsuya to find Shadow, saying that he is the key. Tetsuya then finds himself on a large ship where he runs into Shadow of all people. Well, that was quick. Shadow manages to escape, returning Tetsuya back to square one. Tetsuya then appears in America where he has to fight Six, who, for some reason, decides to drive around in circles to run him over. Tetsuya makes quick work of Six and moves on. However, it's too late, as when Tetsuya arrives at his next destination, he makes a startling discovery.
I took care of Shadow.
What?
You just go home.
I can't accept that. Shadow is mine!
With that out of the way, Tetsuya inspects Shadow's helmet and looks at him off-screen to discover that Shadow has actually been a woman this whole time. In his confused state, Tetsuya lets his guard down, and is shot in the back by... another Shadow? Waking up in a cell of some sort, Tetsuya shoots the lock off and proceeds with his journey. We now return to the present back in the warehouse. After defeating Shadow yet again, Tetsuya is ambushed by multiple Shadows this time, revealing that the name Shadow has been referring to a secret group of individuals instead of one singular person. While there is indeed one true Shadow that Tetsuya has to find, he doesn't know which one is the real one at this point. After the battle, Tetsuya secretly follows a surviving Shadow, and he ends up at the nest where he runs into Lawrence. After putting him down, Tetsuya finally reaches his final destination and has the truth of the matter revealed to him.
What is this place? I've been waiting for you, Tetsuya. Or shall I say, RDO1. My father's inheritance was just bait.
Huh?
To destroy defective products like you was my mission. Now, let me enjoy the taste of destruction.
Shadow reveals to Tetsuya that he isn't the boss's son, rather, he himself is the boss and his death was merely a hoax created as bait to draw Tetsuya out. Throughout their battle, the boss evolves into different forms, with each being more mechanical than the last. Eventually, the boss throws away what little humanity he has left and embraces his robotic powers to destroy Tetsuya, but our hero comes out on top.
Cannot be I. But you are the only RD granddaughter will... die, old man. Both you and Shadow use the power the wrong way. Power should be used to protect people that are important to you.
Perhaps the most important point the boss makes here is about his granddaughter. This plot thread never goes anywhere, and is spoken right before the game ends. By inputting a cheat code on the main menu, a new character called Cindy is unlocked, and with her android body and dark outfit, I'm somewhat inclined to believe that she is the boss's granddaughter, but as you can't use Cindy in story mode, I'll never truly know. With that, Tetsuya has accomplished his goal and secures the inheritance. After being sent to prison for the destruction caused by his actions, Tetsuya's Oyabun uses the inheritance to bail him out, ending the story for good.
Get up, you're free to go.
What did you say?
Billions were scattered to public prosecutors and judges. I guess there's someone stupid enough to save even a punk like you.
Oyabun.
Again, 2Spicy's story isn't amazing, far from it, but its shoddy voice acting and dialogue give the game a certain charm, I feel. The other characters follow the same formula of trying to find Shadow and travelling around the world, but with different cutscenes and endings, and some of them are quite funny. My favourites are when Minghua uses solar energy to ensure her battery never runs out, and when Lawrence uses the boss's inheritance to build a dog kingdom. We've been talking about the game's story for a bit, so let's finally explore how 2Spicy actually plays. As we've established, 2Spicy is a light gun shooter, so you hold the gun up towards the screen to aim and pull the trigger to fire. Every character has their own weapon which cannot be switched, and there are no extra forms of offense like the House of the Dead's grenade system. The cabinet also has 3 foot pedals for you to use. The middle one is used to pop in and out of cover, the left pedal is to run to the left, and the right pedal makes you run to the right. If you double tap the pedal, your character will run faster, and if you double tap during the run, you can dolphin dive onto the ground to try to throw your enemy off and change up your movement patterns. Camping behind a single piece of cover won't work, however, because 2Spicy features fully destructible environments that dynamically take damage in real time when you shoot them. If your opponent loves to play defensively and hug their cover, you can destroy it to blow them away, literally. When they're knocked down, you can shoot them as many times as you want, albeit with a massive damage nerf to ensure you don't become too powerful. Another gameplay feature present in 2Spicy is the zoom mechanic. If you pop out of cover and hover your opponent, you can zoom in on their body. Shooting them when zoomed in does massive damage, and this provides a risk-reward element to the gameplay. Standing out of cover while not shooting or moving makes you a sitting duck, and if your opponent realizes you're zooming into them, they can always run away or hide behind cover, ruining your plans. But if you manage to get that perfect zoom shot, the reward is amazing. With all of these systems acting in tandem, 2Spicy can be a bit overwhelming at first, but it's surprisingly easy to understand when you pick it up and start playing. Going back to the fighting game part of 2Spicy, I'll explain my thoughts in more detail. Fighting game characters can essentially be boiled down into archetypes with general game plans and strategies. For example, Tetsuya and Minghua are complete characters with no major weaknesses, but they lack anything that's amazing or broken, making them standard all-rounders. Lawrence is slow and can't fight well from a distance, but when he gets close, his damage output and intimidation factor is very high, making him resemble a grappler of sorts. Charlie has lots of ammo and a high firing rate, but he doesn't do much damage, so I personally view him as a zoner who must rely on engaging the enemy from a distance and not blindly rushing in. Sure, my examples may be a bit of a stretch, but the characters in 2Spicy all feel different to play, and they can be placed into distinct categories when attempting to classify their playstyle, and this reminds me of a traditional fighting game. The stage you select matters too. Again, taking Lawrence as an example, he's slow, and he doesn't cover distance very well, so a larger stage like the subway doesn't fit him well as he leaves himself open to attack when moving in between cover, but a smaller stage like the Japanese restaurant suits him well as he doesn't have to move around too much. The story mode and CPU battles in the game's versus mode act as a good way for you to familiarize yourself with the game mechanics before you attempt to challenge another player, and I remember playing story mode to practice before I would challenge my dad in this game at the arcade, although this was a long time ago. One other thing I'd like to elaborate on is the game's presentation. You might have noticed by now, but 2Spicy has a very eye-catching style of presentation. While the battle graphics definitely look like they belong in the early 2000s, the game's menus are beautiful, and the heavy use of yellow gives the game its unique identity, I feel. The character portraits at the top of the screen give the impression that these guys can be found on a wanted poster, and when you input your initials on the high score screen, it looks like the type of font that will be found on a ransom note. The game has this really underground, kinda grungy vibe to it, and the major reason for this, in my eyes at least, are the cutscenes. Practically, they're extremely simple. Apply a black and white filter over the characters and place them in front of a static image. But the comic book speech bubbles, exaggerated character movements, and keyframed background movement give the game a sense of urgency, I suppose. The characters don't want to wait too long before they make some progress in their journey, and that also applies to the player. If I had to describe it, I'd say 2Spicy's presentation is like a mix between Jet Set Radio and Persona 5. Even after having spent years not playing this game due to my arcade getting rid of the machine, the game's heavy use of yellow, black, and white ensured that it reserved a spot in the back of my brain, constantly giving me an itch to play it. Returning to the game after all these years with a new mindset and a more mature outlook on things, look, I can say, I think the game still looks amazing. Unfortunately, 2Spicy was never ported to any consoles, so you can't play the game legitimately unless you find an arcade cabinet. However, the PC program TechnoParrot will allow you to play the game for free using a mouse and keyboard or even with a light gun if you own one, so if you want to download the game to try it out for yourself, you can definitely do so. I think 2Spicy would have worked extremely well on the Wii, and the Wii Remote itself provides all the features necessary to enjoy the game, but I guess Sega disagreed with me. Honestly speaking here, 2Spicy did not make an impact when it came out. I don't think Sega has ever acknowledged the game's existence after it was released, and it seems that the developers behind the game haven't worked on any games in a while. Director Kazutomo Sambongi hasn't been credited on a game since the 2012 PS3 port of The House of the Dead 3, and the same applies to planner Kazuya Takahashi with 2018 Star Horse 3 Season 4, and composer Makito Nomiya with Border Break, which also came out in 2018. 2Spicy was one of those really weird, one-off arcade games that never went anywhere, but I think that's a major shame due to its innovative gameplay and really stylish presentation. I really had a lot of fun with this game as a kid, and I'm still having fun with it now that I'm in my 20s, so if you ever get the chance to play this game, be it in an arcade or otherwise, I highly recommend it. Thanks a lot for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope your day is even spicier than this game is.